Hey there, good morning everyone. I'm Errol Barnett in for our friend Vladimir Duthiers. At this moment, we're gathering details on all the major news happening across the US and around the world. This hour, a major case is being argued at the Supreme Court. Justices are hearing issues raised by the Trump administration's effort to end birthright citizenship. We'll look into the seismic impact their decision could have. Plus, President Trump is in the UAE right now for the final leg of his Middle East trip. We'll share new footage being fed to us in real time and discuss new deals which could affect the region and U.S. businesses. Also coming up, highly anticipated talks between Ukraine and Russia. They seem to be falling apart right now. We'll explain why Russian President Putin is a no-show and the blunt message from President Trump about the prospects for peace. You're in the right place. This is CBS News 24/7. We will start with the nation's highest court. Right now, the Supreme Court is hearing arguments related to President Trump's executive order to end birthright citizenship. Now, that order aims to bar citizenship for any child born in the U.S. with parents who are here illegally or temporarily, like those who work on a visa. Immigrant rights groups in 22 states, they immediately filed lawsuits following the executive action, and 3 federal judges blocked it nationwide. They call this unconstitutional. Then 3 appeals courts upheld those rulings while the legal process plays out. CBS News contributor Jessica Levinson joins us right now with more details on what's at play. Jessica, great to see you. Haven't seen you and connected with you in a while. This is a really important topic, and we should clarify for our viewers that today's arguments aren't necessarily about the merits of the case, but instead the nationwide injunctions of the executive order. So explain that for us.
Well, that's exactly right. And it's great to be able to talk to you about this. So this is, as you said, one of the big cases of the term, and it has something and nothing to do with birthright citizenship in the sense of what the court is really going to be asking is how big of a remedy, how big of a win can a federal judge give you? When you walk into federal court and you complain that there is a problem with an executive order, in this case, the executive order deals with birthright citizenship, then what can that federal judge do? Can the federal judge say, okay, I'm going to stop that executive order from being enforced anywhere in the country? That's a nationwide injunction, and that's what federal judges have done in this case. Or do federal judges have more limited power to only say, I'm going to stop that executive order from being enforced with respect to the parties who sued? So this is, again, really about the scope of the remedy that somebody can get when they walk into federal court and say, there's a problem with this executive order.
Let's play out that scenario a little bit, Jessica. What happens if the court agrees to limit the ability of judges to issue these nationwide or universal injunctions? Does it become like a patchwork of laws, in essence?
Yes, it does. So when we think about the executive order dealing with birthright citizenship, it means that there is about half of the country where birthright citizenship, where that particular executive order could actually go into effect until people sue. Now, I expect that when people and groups and states do sue, that federal judges would do what the other judges have done, which is block that executive order. But it does mean that until the time other people go into court, that you could have this patchwork, and or for an issue that's a closer legal call, more controversial, you could have different judges coming out in different directions.
And as we mentioned, the Supreme Court's hearing these arguments this hour. When might they issue a final decision? Or I guess how soon, possibly, could we get a result?
Well, this is a special session of oral arguments. Typically, they're done at the end of April. And typically, all of the opinions, as you know, because we talk about them, are out by the end of June, or sometimes they bleed into the first few days of July. I expect that they will get their opinion to us by then.
Very fascinating stuff. Great to have Jessica walk us through some of the key components. Thank you very much, Jessica. We'll talk to you again soon, and we'll check in with you as the hearing gets underway as well. All right, President Trump has arrived in the United Arab Emirates. You see here being welcomed. This is his final stop on his Middle East tour. Before landing in Abu Dhabi, the president told reporters that this has been an amazing trip overall, and he said the U.S. now has a very good relationship with these Gulf nations. Listen.
I shook more hands than any human being is capable of doing. That was a long deal, and they were big people. But they were starving for love because our country didn't give them love. They gave them a fist bump.
CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Zhang is traveling with the president and joins us from a perch atop Abu Dhabi, overlooking some of the key landmarks there. Weijia, great to see you. President Biden was actually criticized for a fist bump being too friendly, as we heard President Trump allude to there. And now this region is yearning for love, if you quote what he says. So what is on Mr. Trump's agenda today? What is he up to?
Well, Errol, the entire theme of this visit, his first foreign visit, has been let's make a deal, right? So we saw big investment announcements in Saudi Arabia and Qatar, and we expect more here in the UAE. So the president started his leg here in Abu Dhabi by visiting the country's largest mosque. He's also heading over to the presidential palace before the official state visit begins. And when it comes to business, Errol, we expect the top of the agenda will be artificial intelligence, because this very rich country wants to also be an AI hub for the world. And so one potential deal we are watching is with the American company NVIDIA to see if it can export about 500,000 chips made in America here to the UAE every year. We also know that after a top national security advisor met with President Trump in the U.S. back in March, the country committed to, over a decade, investing $1.4 trillion in AI infrastructure and energy. So we'll see what other potential deals come out of today, Errol.
And Weijia, we know that President Trump can be hyperbolic at times. He likes to kind of speak in very simple terms, and it takes a little bit of effort to get to the actual detail and substance beneath it. I know that this morning he said the U.S. is close to a nuclear deal with Iran, but what do we know about the specifics of that?
Well, to your point, Errol, he also said that, look, I know you guys want 30 pages of details, but really only one sentence matters, which is that Iran is not going to have a nuclear weapon. And it's not surprising that we don't have a lot of those details, because obviously these two sides do not want to negotiate in public. But it's notable that a top Iranian security advisor sat down with another American media outlet to talk about what they are willing to concede and what they want. And during the interview, this official said that they want economic sanctions on Iran to be lifted, and that they would be willing not to enrich uranium, which of course is the biggest concern, because that would take them from having a nuclear capability to developing a nuclear weapon, which they have said in this interview they do not intend to do. But of course, we don't really know until we know what that deal looks like. And the Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, has reportedly handed over to Tehran a written proposal for them to look at. And I can tell you, Errol, that the energy secretary was very optimistic when I asked him about a potential deal, saying that likely before the end of the year. But of course, that could even happen sooner if you listen to President Trump.
Very interesting. Of course, Iran, just across the Gulf there from where you are in the UAE. Weijia Zhang in Abu Dhabi, thank you very much. All right, now on his way to Abu Dhabi, President Trump also weighed in on today's talks between delegations from Russia and Ukraine. And he seemed to throw cold water on the idea that anything will get done without him in the room.
Nothing's going to happen until Putin and I get together, okay? And obviously he wasn't going to go. He was going to go, but he thought I was going to go. He wasn't going if I wasn't there. And I don't believe anything's going to happen, whether you like it or not, until he and I get together. But we're going to have to get it solved, because too many people are dying.
Let's bring in CBS News foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tayyab joining us from London. Imtiaz, that's really fascinating to hear the president sum it up in such simple terms, that President Putin wouldn't agree to peace without President Trump physically there. We've also got Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, really trying to invite Putin into some type of talks. But if we listen to each side, Russia and Ukraine in Turkey, it doesn't seem like we're anywhere near close to getting some type of agreement. What's the latest on all of that?
Errol, the rhetoric before these two sides even meet face to face has been, well, interesting, to say the least. President Zelensky very early on in the day dismissed the Russian delegation as, quote, mere stand-in props, which is not exactly an olive branch, because that led to Moscow's foreign ministry to respond with the subtlety of a brick, labeling Zelensky, and I'm quoting here, as a clown and a loser. Kyiv volleyed back, calling the Russian spokesperson a laughingstock whose job it is simply to bark from Moscow. So all of this follows a meeting that the Ukrainian president had with the Turkish president in Ankara, where Zelensky said that Ukraine is showing up at the highest level, while Russia is really showing up in what he's been describing as a sham. Whatever the case, President Putin, as we know, has remained conspicuously absent. But this is very serious, despite the rhetoric. We, of course, have seen 3 years of missile strikes, trench warfare, and a death toll so grim it now qualifies as Europe's worst war in generations. So the fact that we have both sides at least considering a conversation, even though this rhetoric may be vintage playground, again, the fact that these delegations are even in Istanbul is very meaningful. Errol.
Yeah, and President Zelensky has been clear that his people continue to suffer. The Russian attacks continue in many cities in Ukraine. And there's also a NATO meeting happening in Turkey. So other nations are doing what they can. But if President Trump seems to feel that he can have leverage over Putin, isn't it really all about getting President Putin to agree to a ceasefire somehow, some way, and European entities using, I guess, sanction power to get him closer to that? Isn't that the current state of play?
Yeah, that's a real astute read of the situation at hand here, Errol. But the reality is that the gulf between Ukraine and Russia is so massive. And President Trump seems to understand that. We heard him a little bit earlier saying nothing is going to happen until Putin and I get together, really saying that the fate of Europe's largest and bloodiest conflict hinges on him. Now, he, of course, is clearly keen to reprise his role as a global deal maker, but insists he's waiting for some serious movement. What that serious movement is, we don't know. But again, President Trump is in the region. The talks between Russia and Ukraine are still expected to happen today on whatever level they choose it to be. This would be the first direct contact since Russia's 2022 full-scale invasion. And whether Trump and Putin crash the party later this week or not, that, of course, remains to be seen. The fact remains, this war grinds on. Overnight, both Ukraine and Russia reported attempted drone strikes, a stark reminder that while officials may be gathering in Istanbul, the missiles continue to fall. Errol.
Yeah, that's the reality check. Imtiaz Tayyab with the latest for us from our London bureau. Imtiaz, thank you. All right, we've got some fresh new economic data out this morning, and it's giving us a clearer picture of the effect President Trump's tariffs are having on wholesalers. Right now, you're looking at the Dow Jones this morning. It seems to be pulling back 130 points or so. The producer price index fell 0.5% in the month of April. Now, it rose 2.4% on an annual basis, which actually beat Wall Street's expectations. But what does that all mean? Let's bring in Megan Leonhardt now. She's a senior writer for Barron's and can help break down what it all means. Good morning to you. I know that there's some tough information being released by Walmart as well. So give us a reality check on how things are out there for people.
The reality is that tariffs are really complicating the picture. It was interesting. We did actually, as you pointed out, see a decline in wholesale prices. It was actually the largest monthly decline in producer prices since the onset of the pandemic 5 years ago. So that was very notable. But once you start looking under the hood of that data release, it's really interesting because it actually was signaling tariff pressures are really being fed through in the very early stages, and prices are expected to start to rebound. down. Now, it's interesting because when it comes to the PPI, the Producer Price Index, we really kind of pair that with the Consumer Price Index to try to estimate what we're going to see in the Fed's inflation gauge. And this morning's numbers do actually show that we're going to get another soft month of the Fed's inflation gauge at the end of the month that's coming out. And, that's good news. It means that cooling pricing pressures were part of the trend before, of course, the sort of onset of these higher tariffs. And of course, this is something that everyone is watching very closely. We saw this was a big product of, a big topic of concern at Walmart's earnings this morning. And Walmart was really quite, succinct in their talking points here. They did obviously very well on the quarter, and their guidance for the year is firmly in place. But they were very clear. Higher tariffs are going to mean higher prices. Now, it is interesting. Walmart really did try to break it down and say that they're really trying to preserve food prices in particular and trying not to put a ton of upward pressure there. But it is something that shoppers and everyday Americans really do need to be concerned about over the next couple months. As I said, we haven't seen a ton of tariffs and the effects of tariffs really moving into prices yet, but that doesn't mean that it's not coming. And even though we've had some, trade negotiations that have lowered effective tariff rates, particularly with regards to China, unfortunately, it's not enough to really staunch the higher prices that we're expected to see later this year.
Yeah, this is the largest retailer in the country. So many folks watching are near a Walmart or rely on a Walmart for their day-to-day items. So it's a very big deal. Megan Leonhardt, thanks for joining us today and talking about this. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
All right, still ahead for you all, Sean Diddy Combs' lawyers have their first chance now to question his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, as she returns to the stand today. But first, let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore. He has a preview of your national forecast. Grant?
Errol, still talking about the same thing that we were yesterday. Big-time heat across the central and southern United States. That actually is going up into the Midwest later today. We're talking triple-digit heat, more summer-like type temperatures today. But all of that warmth fueling the threat for severe weather from the Midwestern states through the Great Lakes, even into portions of the Mid-Atlantic. We're tracking all of this coming up here in just a few minutes. You're watching CBS News 24/7. We're coming right back.
All right, welcome back. We've got some breaking news just into our newsroom. Wisconsin judge Hannah Dugan has just entered a not guilty plea in her federal obstruction case. CBS News Justice Department correspondent Scott McFarlane was in court for the hearing. He joins us now from Milwaukee outside of the courtroom. Scott, help us understand the judge's not guilty plea and what she's basing it on. That may also come as a surprise to some of our viewers.
Yeah, Judge Dugan, whose courtroom is just down the street at the local courthouse here in Milwaukee, pleaded not guilty, and the trial date has been set for July 21st and July 22nd here at the federal courthouse in Milwaukee. She's facing 2 federal charges with a maximum penalty of 5 years in prison if convicted. It's an obstruction case, and you'll recall the accusations here, Errol. She's accused of deliberately rerouting a criminal defendant who was in her courtroom last month away from federal immigration agents who are outside, trying to detain and potentially deport that criminal defendant. Her not guilty plea was just that, a simple plea, little more today. But in a filing yesterday, she made more of an argument that there is a form of judicial immunity for what happens in her courtroom that is outside the jurisdiction of the executive branch. She says that it only protects her during this case. She's arguing this should protect her from having the case at all, that it should be dismissed.
And Scott, in that filing, did the lawyers for the judge reference the previous Supreme Court ruling that which upheld a sense of immunity for presidential actions? And if so, how novel is this approach for a judge to say, this is part of my official acts, and therefore you cannot legally challenge me on it?
Yeah, her argument was laced with some indirect references to last year's Supreme Court ruling that talked about presidential immunity, that when there's an official act being undertaken by a government official, the government official cannot be prosecuted for the official act. And in this case, the local judge is talking about her courtroom where she has jurisdiction. Let me step aside for a moment, show you the crowd that has gathered here. It was couple hundred people when the morning started. It's grown a little bit since. These are supporters of Judge Dugan from here in Milwaukee County, Wisconsin, carrying signs in protest of the arrest, having speeches and chants in protest of this case at all. They'd like to have it dismissed here, too. But you can just get a sense from it, Errol. This is bigger than just the local judge. This case is being viewed as an argument over the separation of powers and alleged overreach by the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice is arguing something quite different, that this judge interfered with federal agents, put their lives in danger by rerouting that defendant, and that this prosecution is righteous and necessary.
And considering the implications, the attention on the case, and the emotions it appears to be stirring up there in Milwaukee, Scott, what do we expect next? I know you said that the court date has been set. What happens in the interim? Is the judge detained? Is she out on bail? What's happening in the meantime?
This is a non-violent felony. There are no release conditions. She's released on her own recognizance, but she's been pulled off the bench locally pending the outcome of this case. We were in her courthouse yesterday looking around, talking to folks there. There's a sign on her door that has her name still, but she's not sitting there until this is disposed of. With a trial date for July, it's a pretty aggressive trial date. It's pretty quick on the calendar. She agreed to that in court today, saying she wants a speedy trial. She wants a speedy disposition. Typically in the federal system, Errol, you get plea negotiations that get underway, but this is a unique case, quite different. It's hard to see how this ends up short of a trial, a high-profile trial here in midsummer.
Just fascinating. And Scott McFarlane on the scene with all the latest information. Scott, thank you very much. A dangerous heat wave will make parts of Texas among the hottest places on Earth today. Yes, you heard that right. Triple-digit temperatures are hitting much of the state earlier than usual, and it's sparking concern. Some local power grids just may not be ready. Let's bring in Doug Lewin now. He's host of the Energy Capital podcast, and he's also a Texas energy expert and a professor at the University of Texas at Austin with expertise in the electric grid, renewable energy, and more. Great to have you on this topic, and folks should be aware Texas has its own grid. It's disconnected from the rest of the country. It's not regulated, I believe, by the federal government. So why is the timing of this heat wave, such an early heat wave in Texas, so concerning to so many people there?
Well, I think, first of all, thanks for having me. I think folks are, paying a lot more attention to the grid these days after Winter Storm Uri. So there's just a lot of attention on the grid and the performance of the grid. And obviously, if you get something like we just got with a 100-degree temperature in Austin yesterday, that is going to raise a lot of eyebrows because usually you don't get 100 degrees in May, right? Usually we don't get a 100-degree day until July. And we are starting to see the impacts of climate change that are hitting. And this has real impacts on the grid. The heat is a real strain on infrastructure. It also limits the amount of time that the thermal power plants, think of like big gas and coal plants, have to go offline for maintenance, just like your car needs maintenance sometimes. These are really big, complicated machines, much more complicated than a car. They need to take months often for maintenance. And as it gets hotter and hotter in the spring, that maintenance window gets shorter and narrower, which makes it more likely there's going to be outages in the summertime. So this early heat really is concerning for a variety of reasons.
And Texans will have fresh memories of the grid going down during a cold snap when it was freezing throughout the state. This is very risky for the elderly and for super young folks. And climate change is the type of thing that organizations have been warning about for decades. So in many ways, we did know this was coming. What's your assessment in how prepared the Texas grid is for what we all knew would be grueling or more grueling summers?
Well, there is some really good news here, which is that Texas has deployed more utility-scale solar than any other state in the United States, and at a faster pace than just about any place in the world. Certainly China and Pakistan and a few other places are deploying more solar, but within the U.S., number one and ranking very high globally as well. So that makes a very, very big difference in the summertime. Obviously, if you think about these heat waves, the hotter it gets, typically the more sunny it is. So Texas now has over 30,000 megawatts of solar. To put that in perspective, the all-time May peak record was set yesterday at about 78,000. So 25 to 30% of the power, all that air conditioning churning all over the great state of Texas, was provided by solar power. And those numbers are increasing too. So that helps with our preparedness. I think where we've really got to sort of dial up the preparedness is on the distribution grid, because it really needs hardening, because when it gets hot, things start to sort of, melt down, right? That heat day after day, week after week, month after month puts a lot of strain on infrastructure. And I don't think we're ready for that yet.
Yeah, at the very least, you got those solar panels, though. I know my mom in Arizona had to put some on her roof as well to help with the energy bill. We all will need them soon. Doug Lewin, we appreciate you joining us. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, oral arguments. They're underway right now in the Supreme Court hearing over President Trump's bid to end birthright citizenship. What we've heard so far from the justices is coming up next. You're in the right place, streaming CBS News 24/7. All right, welcome back. The Supreme Court hearing is underway right now. It focuses on President Trump's birthright citizenship executive order and the many challenges to it. The order bars citizenship for any child born in the U.S. with parents who are here illegally or under temporary status. 3 appeals courts upheld rulings by federal judges, blocking the EO while the legal process plays out. Let's bring back in CBS News contributor Jessica Levinson for more on the legal battle. Jessica, you've had the benefit of listening in to the oral arguments, and I understand by now there's been a bit of an exchange by justices on opposing ideological sides of the bench. Fill us in.
So the argument started a little late. We're about 18 minutes in. And what's fascinating here is you see the justices really right away in their questioning display what matters to them most and their different ideologies. So Justice Clarence Thomas, the longest serving justice on the court, immediately saying, talk to me about nationwide injunctions and historical analogs. He is very much about looking at the original meaning, about looking at history and tradition. And then right away, you have Justice Sonia Sotomayor jumping in. She's often the justice who asks the most about real world consequences. And she said, let me give you a hypothetical. Let me give you a hypothetical about the next president who comes in and says, I'm taking away everybody's guns. Do you not want federal judges to be allowed to say, here's a nationwide injunction? Do people have to sue piecemeal? So just fascinating in terms of all of the justices right off the bat showing what matters to them most.
And remind us that while the headline is the Supreme Court hears arguments over birthright citizenship, that the essence of what's being debated today really deals with those nationwide injunctions.
Absolutely. So the case comes to the court based on President Trump's executive order and the many lawsuits to stop that executive order, which would have essentially undermined birthright citizenship in the 14th Amendment. Many people sued. Federal judges issued these things called nationwide injunctions, meaning that the executive order can't go into effect not just with respect to the parties who sued, but with respect to everybody nationwide. And so the question that the court is struggling with is, do federal judges have the power to do that? Do they have the power to say, this executive order, stop it, halt it, not just for the people who walked into my courtroom and asked me, but with respect to everybody? It cannot be implemented anywhere. And that's where you see the arguments and the tension today.
All right, Jessica Levinson joining us from Los Angeles. Jessica, thank you. CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camila Montoya Galvez is also following this for us. Camila, great to have you in on this topic. We know that the central issue isn't necessarily birthright citizenship, but these nationwide injunctions. And we know the Trump administration has been trying hard to change and limit immigration to the U.S. So if the justices are able to rule on these injunctions, let's say that they pull back the ability for them to be nationwide, how might that impact the administration's efforts for future deportation cases?
Good morning, Errol. That is a critical question because this ruling by the Supreme Court on this very question that Jessica was probing and investigating could have major implications on federal immigration policy making. Many of the Trump administration's actions to undo protections for hundreds of thousands of immigrants, for example, that were established under the Biden administration are right now enjoined in federal court. Lower courts across the country have prevented the administration, for example, Errol, from terminating temporary protective status for hundreds of thousands of Venezuelan migrants. Lower courts have also barred the administration from ending the temporary legal status of 500,000 migrants from Venezuela, Haiti, Cuba, and Nicaragua who were able to come here under a Biden administration process. If the Supreme Court sides with the Trump administration and the Justice Department's arguments and narrows the ability for lower court judges to issue nationwide injunctions on these sort of federal immigration policy making actions, we could very well see the Trump administration having the ability to not only revoke the legal status of these hundreds of thousands of migrants who right now are protected from deportation and allowed to work in the country lawfully, but they could very well proceed also with their efforts to deport these people from the U.S. So it could have wide-ranging implications, Errol.
It could effectively empower the Trump administration to do more of what it's doing and limit the ability of judges to rule against it. Camila Montoya-Galvez, thank you very much. We turn our attention now to the war in Gaza. Israeli airstrikes across the area have reportedly killed more than 100 people. Israel says it will not stop until Hamas is completely defeated, but the international community is criticizing this new bombardment. CBS News foreign correspondent Deborah Pata brings us more on the humanitarian situation right now inside Gaza.
Gaza is facing catastrophic hunger, and according to the IPC, a global hunger monitoring group, 500,000 people face starvation. That's a quarter of the territory's population. Israel has prevented all food and medicine from entering the territory. The newly created and US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has announced it will start work before the end of the month, but has asked Israel to allow the United Nations and others to resume deliveries to Gaza until it's set up. The foundation's distribution plan, which was initiated by Israel and involves several U.S. companies handing out aid from what they call secure distribution points, has faced heavy criticism. Both the United Nations and the International Red Cross have raised concerns that the operation would not adhere to long-held humanitarian principles of impartiality, independence, and neutrality. In a bid to allay fears, the foundation has said it would not share any personally identifiable information of aid recipients with Israel. Back to you.
All right, Deborah, thank you for that. Right now, the House is moving forward with President Trump's so-called big, beautiful bill. You've heard that phrase so many times over the past few months. 3 committees voted to advance some parts of the budget package, which is aimed at addressing priorities of the president's agenda. Let's bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian. Continue to track all of this from Capitol Hill for us this morning. Bring us up to speed on where things stand now, Nicole, and what the next process or next step is in the process for the bill, and of course the sticking points that seem to be holding things up for Republicans.
Well, as far as the Speaker, his main goal is to get this over the finish line before the Memorial Day recess, so he's trying to stay steadily focused on that. Obviously, now that work has completed within pretty much most of the House committees, it wasn't just the 3 this week, but others earlier this month that had been marking up the bill as well. Now we will see that bill advance to the House Budget Committee, where they will basically assemble this package with a big, beautiful bow, if you will. But at the end of the day, Speaker Mike Johnson still needs the vote, and so he is meeting at this hour with a number of Republicans who have differences over the package. Conservative lawmakers, members of the House Freedom Caucus, who feel that some of the cuts in these packages don't go far enough, that this is the time to make these steep cuts to try to bring down the debt and the deficit. You have on the other side, many moderates who are a little squeamish about some of these cuts, whether it's to Medicaid or other programs. There's also still this unresolved issue issue of the state and local tax deductions, also known as SALT, which is something that really impacts many people, primarily in the Northeast and California. So you have lawmakers advocating for an increase in the cap to that particular deduction so that families can try to save a little bit more. So there's still a lot of things to tie up, if you will, but the speaker hoping that he can get everybody on the same page to try to advance this bill next week.
Yeah, the pressure is definitely on. And I know, Nicole, you've always got smart shoes on because it's never a dull moment in your part of the world. And you've got multiple hearings on the Hill happening this hour. It includes ones with the EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin and Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy. Bring us up to date on what's happening on those fronts.
Yeah, well, keep in mind, obviously, the president not too long ago released his budget blueprint, what's being called a skinny budget, because it doesn't detail all the things that the administration would like to do, but it's kind of a snapshot of some of his budget priorities that he would like to see lawmakers address here on Capitol Hill. So you basically have a number of cabinet secretaries that are up here not only this week, but also next week testifying about that budget. In the case of EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin and Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, they are testifying today at appropriations committees, both in the House and Senate. But really, for Democrats in particular, this is an opportunity for them to try to rake some of these officials over the coals, particularly as a number of these different agencies have seen cuts. So with respect to the EPA, that has really been the subject and thrust of a lot of these hearings, really trying to get at the nature of some of the cuts that the agency is trying to impose, particularly at the EPA, where they have really sliced the budget almost in half, rolled back a number of initiatives from the Biden administration. So Democrats have been grilling Zeldin on that. In terms of transportation, obviously, there's a lot of concern about safety, of course, in light of some of those outages we have seen most recently at Newark. So that has also been a topic of discussion, with the secretary saying that this is going to take several years to try to reform this system with respect to air traffic control.
Yeah, Democrats on these panels trying to flex their oversight muscle. Nicole Killian with all the latest details. Nicole, thank you. All right, hot, dry conditions out of Minnesota are fueling several wildfires right now. They've scorched close to 40,000 acres. All of this is north of Duluth. So far, more than 140 structures have been destroyed and about 1,000 homes have been evacuated. Officials are investigating whether one of these fires was started by a group of campers who left a fire unattended. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with another look at the national forecast. Grant, you cannot go camping and leave those flames, burning at all. Always, throw dust over them and dirt. What are you looking at?
You got to make Right, you got to make sure you extinguish those campfires properly, make sure that all the embers are out. And I mean, this time of year, you start talking about more heat, the humidity drops, and then it just takes a little breeze to blow maybe a coal or something like that and start a fire. It could go bad, and it could get bad really quickly. Speaking of heat, man, it is still very hot. It's going to stay hot across Texas today. San Antonio looking at a high temperature today of 102 degrees, blowing the record high of 98 degrees out of the water. They hit 92 yesterday, so that's 2 straight days of temperatures up at 102 degrees. And the heat swells all up into the Midwestern states. Chicago looking at a high temperature this afternoon around 86 degrees. The heat and humidity, of course, in place across the Gulf states and into the Sunshine State. Now, the heat will actually be suppressed to the south. Notice how temperatures up towards St. Louis will go from the 80s to the 70s over the next couple of days. Meanwhile, the 90s, if not near triple-digit temperatures, continue. So that's dangerous heat across southern Texas over the next several days. Now, that heat is actually going to be helping to fuel the chance for severe weather over the next few days as well, as a cold front will be pushing that threat for severe weather to the south. Today, though, the focus for that severe weather is going to be across the Midwestern states, up across the Great Lakes, where we have several threats for severe weather, not just damaging winds, but, of course, that pretty significant threat for tornadoes. You're looking at the threat for EF2, maybe some EF3 tornadoes today from southwestern Michigan into northern Indiana, Illinois, and then up across a good portion of the state of Wisconsin. And then you've got the damaging wind threat. That damaging wind threat is going to extend well to the east, even into parts of the mid-Atlantic as we go through the afternoon into this evening. And large hail, we're talking about hail 2.5, maybe 3 inches in diameter. Again, all of that being fueled by that heat that will be suppressed to the south as that severe threat also drops to the south as we head through the next few days. Errol, back to you.
All right, Grant, appreciate the update. Thank you very much. Still ahead for you all, a major transit strike is looming, and it could impact hundreds of thousands of people who commute from New Jersey to New York City, where the negotiations stand right now is coming up. You're in the right place, streaming CBS News 24/7. All right, welcome back. A potential New Jersey transit strike could begin tomorrow. Engineers are pushing the transit agency for pay raises. You've got both sides working towards a deal, but here's the catch. If one isn't reached by midnight tonight, many commuters could be in jeopardy. CBS News New York reporter Christina Fan brings us more. Christina, good morning.
Good morning. NJ Transit and union leaders are scheduled to meet again later on today, so there is still hope at this time that a deal can be reached. But commuters are already contingency planning in case the clock strikes midnight and trains come to a screeching halt, leaving the 100,000 people who take the trains daily in the lurch. NJ Transit says if engineers do walk off the job Friday morning, your best bet is to work from home. The agency will enhance bus service on 19 existing New York bus routes near rail stations, but warned that those buses can only handle about 20% of daily train riders. Beginning Monday, the agency will also offer park and ride service from 4 regional parking lots during peak commute times. The Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen is made up of about 460 engineers. The union has been at odds with NJ Transit over pay raises, arguing competitors pay more and that the cost of living has gone up. Some other options commuters can turn to include Amtrak, light rail, or ferry service. Boxcar and independent bus service is also offering more buses to accommodate riders. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy says if a strike does occur, all options are on the table, including declaring a state of emergency. Reporting from Secaucus, New Jersey, I'm Christina Fan. Back to you.
All right, Christina, thank you for that. And if you're a Shakira fan in the New York area, this might hit you. There are thousands of you, we know. New Jersey Transit has canceled all trains and buses headed to the Shakira concert tonight at MetLife Stadium. So if you plan to have a good time with the Hips Don't Lie star, make alternate travel plans. All right, now another big story we are following. Sean Diddy Combs' legal team gets its chance to question his former longtime girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, today. The cross-examination follows Ventura's tearful and heartbreaking testimony yesterday and her claims of years of abuse. CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman brings us the latest from federal court here in Manhattan.
Cross-examination of Cassie Ventura is underway. This is Ventura's third day on the stand. The singer spent over a decade in a relationship with Sean Combs, which during the prosecution's direct examination was portrayed to be one of violence, of abuse, both physical and psychological, and one where they were involved in a complicated scheme of sex trafficking, racketeering, and transportation for the purpose of prostitution. All the prosecution says at the direction of Sean Combs. The defense is trying to poke holes in that story, showing that Cassie Ventura was in a loving relationship with Sean Combs, that she was a willing participant in these activities, and that it was all consensual. She is expected to be on the stand through Friday. Back to you.
All right, Katrina Kaufman, thank you for that. We've got much more news for you ahead. You are in the right place. Stay right there. This is CBS News 24/7. Listen to this. Starbucks baristas are on strike over a new company dress code. Employees now have to wear a black solid shirt and bottoms that are either khaki or black or blue denim. The workers' union said this isn't about shirt colors, but also complained of staffing issues and a lack of stipends for the, quote, arbitrary rule. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore for a last check at your weather. Grant, how bad is it out there?
Well, I'll tell you what, some parts of the country, Errol, are really going to have to watch out for that severe threat. The Midwest, from Wisconsin to northern Illinois, Indiana, Michigan today, watching out for that threat for tornadoes, damaging wind, and large hail. Meanwhile, you got that excessive and dangerous heat across South Texas, triple-digit temperatures, and then feels like temperatures up around 110 today. That severe threat goes into the mid-Mississippi Valley and then into the mid-Atlantic over the next couple of days. Back to you.
All right, Grant, thank you very much. That does it for me. I'll see you on the CBS Morning News at 7 a.m. Eastern, and I'm filling in for Vlad again tomorrow. But stay right where you are. After the break, Mugo Odigwe is live from San Francisco with all the breaking news from coast to coast. This is CBS News 24/7.